NyQuil, my friend.
We'll see how that works if I mellow Michael tonight or not. Welcome everyone to Continuing Conversations, where we talk everything about Star Trek Adventures RPG. I'm Michael Dismuke, freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG, in addition to being a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for the game we're talking about. Let's go ahead and introduce Jim Johnson.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, published by Modifius Entertainment, co-host on this here show, and super excited to have a bunch of great guests with us here tonight. And without any further ado, I'm just going to go clockwise around my screen, as you do, and let's start with Al. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
How's it going? Al Spader. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures. I wrote the bit in the player's guide of all the roles, so I'm excited to be here to discuss that. Interestingly enough, I'm also a science teacher in a middle school, so this is exciting.
Perfect. Thank you for being here. As always, appreciate it. Jeff, let's talk to you for a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Jeff Harvey. I am a longtime podcaster, gamer, and content creator for various RPGs. I was also one of the people who helped found the Star Trek STA Engage podcast some time ago, and you're watching it on my channel. So you can find me in all the places at Studio Tembo. I'm everywhere. Got a bunch of TikToks coming out talking about the OTL recently.
That's right. We wouldn't be here. You started it.
Jeff is the Scotty, the Geordie, the Balana behind the scenes, getting it all done. And we can't, I don't thank you enough because I don't see you that often, but thank you for everything that you do for the show. And really
I enjoy it. I enjoy it, and I'm glad the fans really enjoy it. Although you two need to respond to some more of the YouTube comments. There's a whole bunch of them. I'll send them your way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, please do. I guess I need, well, I'm subscribed to the channel. I guess I don't see the comments as they come up, but yeah, if there's something that we need to address, then please send them our way.
Yeah, I didn't even know. Now I'll go look.
Yeah. All right. And
I'm helping the fans out.
Aaron, round us out, please.
Hi, I'm Aaron Pollyea. I'm a longtime freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures. I'm typically the guy that writes a lot of the science stuff and starships, a bit of the technology. I have a background in astrophysics, and I'm currently a climate change researcher. So this is kind of like my episode, right? Well, one of them, I guess.
One of them, yeah. I think we got you on a bunch of episodes about Utopia Planitia, because that was, if there was any book that was you, that was 100. Well, not 100, but that was a vast majority of you. But yeah, this episode all about scientists. We're like we last couple of weeks we talked about doctors, we talked about captains, we've talked about first officers. Now next up is scientists, and then next week we're going to talk about engineers. And I don't know how you all feel, but in my experience, long experience playing Star Trek games, not just Star Trek Adventures, but just in general, science, engineering, bosom buddies involved in like literally everything. Every episode, I was guaranteed that those two characters, those two players would have tons to do. Even if there wasn't anything specific for them to do, they would find a way to get right down into the weeds. So let's open it up and talk about science. The science role in Star Trek Adventures. What's awesome about it? What's not so awesome about it? I think Al, why don't you kick it off since you wrote the chapter in the player's guide? Give us the highlights here.
I mean, yeah, because you when we were writing this said, hey, let's make these roles. Why are they the best role out of the book? And I had to do that for every single role that we have in the game. So as far as science goes, I think that one of the great things about exploring space is that you're always coming upon new things, and typically figuring out what those things are or what how they work is really rooted in science. So I feel like a scientist always has something to do. I think when you're on the bridge, that's really like revolving around scanning and analyzing data and trying to piece together what that means. So what I really like about the science roll is the roll ability, which gives you an opportunity to learn more information as you are exploring. I thought that really was flavorful. Like you can mine the data just a little bit more to find something else hidden beneath it all. I really enjoy that part of the roll.
Yeah, Starfleet at its core is obviously a science-based organization. I mean, they go out and explore the universe. And I think in the game context, almost every story that isn't character-centric is driven forward by the science character, the science role. Almost every quest you go on, again, that isn't character-driven directly, is almost always science-driven in some way. You're discovering anthropology or, some other mechanical thing, even that's not quite engineering, but the science behind the engineering. I think it's probably the easiest role in Star Trek Adventures to play. So.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because everything on a starship is going to be science related, and for any episode, because you're a science officer is generally going to be the character that's going to be putting together the pieces of a puzzle in some way. They're using the sensors of the ship and they're interpreting their senses, sight, sound, whatever. How you're seeing the universe, they're the ones that are putting those pieces together and then trying to put out a theory. So scientific method, folks, observation, and you make your question like, why is this star exploding? Or why is the crew getting sick? Yeah, that's kind of a medical thing, and that can go into the doctor, the chief medical officer role, but that's still science, right? Medicine is a science. And you research, you try to figure out why something is happening. And then you make your hypothesis. You try to figure out if you're right, It's important. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess it would be safe to say that Star Trek Adventures is a science fiction based RPG. Yes. So tonight, we're going to be talking, of course, science. We're all thinking like this is one of the easiest roles to talk about. Mm-hmm. But how do we make it so that maybe what I'm going to ask tonight, like where can we go where maybe scientists don't go usually? I know a lot of you have all played characters that have some sort of science basis to them, but also how can the science officer invite other people to join that exploration with them, whether it's a helm officer or a doctor or whatever. So kind of let's expand it so that if someone's watching this and maybe, it's easy for them to be spotlighted at all times. They're the science officer. The only role that's spotlighted more is probably the captain. But let's talk about how the science officers can invite others to have the science fun too.
I think that's a pretty good question to ask. Like, how do you involve other roles? I can come up with a way to start with this, and that's helm. In order to collect data, you need to move your ship around. When you get a different perspective on a phenomenon, or you move out of a phenomenon, your sensors can actually get a different perspective. You can start piecing together more information, more accurate information, constructive interference in your sensors, using two different viewpoints on the same thing and getting a higher resolution. So helm, I think that's a big deal. It can also be linked in through the helm officer kind of knowing how space works in this area, what's the texture of space-time, so to speak. So, hey, the sensors are going to be warped a little bit because we're very close to this neutron star very close, relatively speaking. The neutron star is bending space-time. Our sensors are going to be affected. Hey, I know that. Maybe you didn't consider that at first.
Yeah, and to bounce off of that too, like if you're in the helm, your navigation sensors might pick up something entirely different than your dorsal sensors or whatever. So I think comparing notes, I think, is a really important thing that you can do. It's possible that security scans will reveal different information than what your science scans are going to reveal, and so on and so forth, and that brings you around to interacting on the bridge, sharing what information you found to get a better picture of what it is that you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Different sensors are going to be tuned for different things, and they're going to understand the information differently. It's kind of like, hey, if you're in a submarine, you might be really close to the surface. You pop up your periscope and you have a radar on it, and you're going to sweep the radar. you might pick up a ping way off in the distance on your radar. Well, what is that? It kind of looks large, but then my sonar can hear it has 2 screws. And that means, we've narrowed down what that exactly can be, what kind of surface vessel that would be. So 2 different types of sensors, 2 different systems, 2 different officers running those systems, putting the information together, getting more out of it than you would otherwise.
And I would even go so far to say, if you are a game master and your bridge crew is scanning an anomaly or something like that, and your con officer wants to, check the nav sensors, do the sensor sweep task, but instead of having them roll science, let them roll con as part of that. Or let your security officer roll security as part of the sensor sweep, because they're trying to get that kind of information out of it. And then once you have that, you discuss it with the scientist and then start piecing together a plan.
Yeah, this is great. I love it. So, one of the things I was going to just kind of piggyback off of that is, in reading and editing Aaron's stuff on spaceships over the years, and having talked to Thomas Maroney over at Star Trek Online about ships, and just reading the technical manuals and stuff that we've enjoyed over the years, it helps me as a gamer and a game master to understand, like, the ship, right? The sensor palettes are installed in certain sections of the ship, right? And your con officer can actually maneuver the ship. And it makes me think about the space program too, right? Using the RCS thrusters and the RCS system, you can actually position those sensor palettes in such a way that you're getting a better visual on whatever it is you're trying to scan, which is super cool. And then kind of like, thinking about Alice, some of the things you were saying is, one of the character roles that I think doesn't get a lot of mention, at least in the game circles that we've been talking to online over the years, is ops, right? Operations is all about managing all the different stations and pallets and stuff on the ship, all the resources on the ship. And a science officer is going to be all up in the ops officer's business on a daily basis, saying, look, I need more power to these sensor pallets. I need more resources. I need these labs opened over the holodeck or whatever. And so, like, there's a constant, give and take there. I think, good relationship, challenging relationship could be whatever the relationship is between science and ops. I think that this is a great opportunity. And now, Michael, I think I don't know if you were doing this intentionally or not, but I kind of got the sense like we're channeling Sam Delev from the last episodes, because she is so amazing at enabling other players. Right? Like, as a science officer, you're like, oh, I can go to the ops player and get them into a scene and talk about this stuff and see what happens. And then I can reach out to the con officer and I can get them involved. And there's just like so many things you can touch. And I think, like Michael, you were saying that, it's a science fiction show. So of course the science officer is going to have a lot to do, because it's in Star Trek's DNA.
One of the things we've done actually in our game to talk about that is we've actually made it where the science officer was angry because they were vying for resources. So what I did is the science officer is the chief science officer on our game, has many departments under them. So I have the NPC science officers. If all of a sudden they're taken off course, or they have to do what you said, like flip the ship to use the aft sensor palette, I have other scientists complain about how it just interrupted their vital experiments. So I go back to that old Inner Light, not the Inner Light, the one that followed when Picard was singing the flute and he met the woman on the piano, and she was upset because her experiments were upset. So based off of that, the science officer actually has to do a lot of negotiating sometimes with the captain for those resources. So I like creating complications and conflict around that. Whenever missions are interrupted, I'm like, who can I really get angry? Which science team was just affected? The geologists, the astrophysicists, that's a way I like messing with science.
And if you're playing the chief science officer on a ship, you're going to be in charge of the science division for the ship. So that means you have constant meetings. You're constantly putting together reports from other scientists and looking at their findings, trying to mesh them all together, especially on a larger ship-wide project. That's a big deal.
Sensors are the senses of the ship, right? That's your field touch, see it, and everything else. And the science officer is kind of you look at everything like from a spinning wheel point of view, they're the hub of everything. They can go to every character, and you can. One of the nice things about it is if say you're in a nebula and you're trying to pilot through that, you've got all your resources on how you can alter your engines. Talking to your engineer, you have the ability to have the con officer move through the system with their, avoiding any debris and things like that. The ops officer, I need more resources to system B or the deflectors for this system, and or in order to keep my navigation sensors online. The captain, obviously, you're going to interface with them in order to give them all the information. There isn't, in any one situation, there isn't any reason why the science officer couldn't interact or shouldn't interact with pretty much everything. Maybe not the counselor, but even then you have stuff you can get into. So especially if you're going for more, if you're using the science character less as a mechanical drive for the motive of the mechanics of the story and more of a personal connection, they can be a hub character that you can see because they talk to everybody. They can get each character's side of things. The captain and the XO and the chief engineer are having some strife. The science officer can talk to both characters without that really interfering because they're a central character in almost everything they do. You can supplement your mechanical role scenes, like if you're doing extended tasks, and you want to just supplement some additional role play in there. That's a great way to advance not only mechanical parts of the story, but also the narrative parts of the story.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people love Star Trek Adventures because of the supporting character option in the game. And so the chief science officer, knowing all the divisions under their belt, I'm reading actually Vanguard series right now, Dane Ward and David Mack, and they have it so that Spock knows which science to officers they should bring. We just saw it in Strange New Worlds where Kirk's brother, he's a life sciences, and he's better for the mission than the main science character. So that's an interesting way to create some conflict. And if you want to play supporting characters, have you filled up your roster on your ship? I know we have about 100 different characters, and they will Google search Control F if they need a geologist or an anthropologist. And so that's a really cool thing that Star Trek Adventures lets you do.
So I modified that rule and all of my players play multiple characters, and they all generally play characters from each division. So each player has a character that is a science officer or whatever. And their characters have different motivations and why they would go on certain missions. That really does play into helping build that tension too between two different science officers. Like my character I wanted to take my character on this, but your character fits better. And then it also causes the problem of, at least in my games, I wanted to play my other character to see if the science officer makes the most sense. I do love the supporting character option though. I just modified it slightly for my particular game.
Yeah, no, I think supporting characters are great. I love that Nathan put them into the game, and because it was something similar to what I was doing in a homebrew ages ago, and I was blessed because I think pretty much every major Star Trek campaign that I've run, I've had a player at the sciences role who was willing to put in the work to create a supporting cast for his department, right? Whether it was junior science officers or doctors or whatever that were doctorate level scientists on the ship, but sometimes they would even create civilians, right? Because like depending on your ship, you might have a cadre of civilian scientists as well, because of course Starfleet's got the resources, and I can posit that there are probably independent civilian science foundations and organizations that probably book time on Starfleet ships, just like science organizations used to book time on the shuttle, and it would rent a pallet or whatever the equivalent was, and they would get their experiments put on the shuttle. But so it's probably the same idea for Starfleet, where you got Starfleet ships out there in the great unknown. It's like, oh, of course I'm a civilian scientist, I want to go test my experiments. We see this all the time, especially on Next Generation. They always had civilian scientists for one reason or another. And so the science officer gets to be in charge of that stuff, gets to deal with that stuff. So not only are you, probably Starfleet, or maybe not Starfleet, depending on your character, but you also get to deal with civilians as well as Starfleet, right? And that could create a lot of tension because, of course, one of the issues that the writers of Next Gen always came up with was like, there's no conflict between our characters because they're all Starfleet and they're all hunky-dory with each other, which is why I think there were a lot of civilian scientists coming onto the ship because they needed to create some tension, right? And I think that's a great opportunity is to, I guess to say, for science players, be willing to work with your game master and create that supporting cast of really weird, interesting characters, either as supporting characters or as, notable NPCs or something, just to create some more variety on the ship.
I think we've all talked, Michael and Al and I have talked in our game a lot about Science Division supporting characters and where they come from, if they're civilians, how they fit into the structure of the ship, what their specialties are, what works best as a civilian specialist rather than a Starfleet Academy graduate, that kind of thing.
Heck, we had an away team composed of a Horta, a Dolphin, and an Exocomp.
Has anyone played a non-Starfleet science officer in a Star Trek game yet?
No. There are supporting characters in our game that are science division that are not.
Yeah,
Starfleet.
all your main characters though are Starfleet officers.
Yeah.
So I suppose that leads the question of what would you guys do differently if you were playing a Starfleet character, or when you're playing a Starfleet character versus playing your main character is a civilian character in a Starfleet situation. I mean, how would you think that would change the way you play the game in general?
I think that it would limit what their position on the ship is. I don't think that there would be a civilian chief science officer. Sure. That just wouldn't. That doesn't fly. But otherwise, I would think that it wouldn't otherwise limit what you can do. Because if you're a civilian expert, you're generally going to have a brevet rank assigned to you anyway, based on like what degrees you have. So, I mean, if you have like multiple doctorates, you probably might end up like, if you're a really super highly skilled person, like let's say Carol Marcus, if she was actually on a ship and had a brevet rank, she might be a lieutenant commander. But if you have somebody that's, hey, I'm working towards my 4-year degree, you might be like a nurse in sickbay or lab tech on the ship. So you're an enlisted type person. And then so somewhere in between there, but you're just not going to be in charge of a whole division or a whole work group.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it, Aaron. You said expert in there, and I know that there is a role in the player's guide that is the expert. So if you were playing a Starfleet scientist, you could go in with that role and have some cool little abilities as you're working. I would play it up as though like I had no idea on how command structure worked or anything like that. Like I was just like, it was my work and it had to get done. And like, I think it would add some interesting conflict and be like almost a little annoyance on the crew. And how do they deal with that? You know what I mean? I think that would be a really fun character to play.
Per beta canon, there's been times where an admiral or Starfleet has appointed a scientific person to a mission, even not even sharing all the details of the mission with the captain themselves. They've had a special order. So they may not have, command of the ship, but they can have command of a particular mission, which could create some interesting conflict. If you were, say, in fact, we were designing an arc with an Oberth class. We had been talking about that with Jim and Al, and having a non-Starfleet person with a long-term research mission, that was going to create a lot of good conflict, I think.
I think that makes sense. Like that kind of character would likely have orders from the Federation Science Council. So like Starfleet takes orders in many ways from the Federation Science Council. Like what they say is, hey, we really want to put resources towards understanding this phenomenon or doing this research because it might make a breakthrough. Hey, we're going to try to do a transwarp experiment. So we're going to put as many scientists as we can and whatever resources we need towards that. And yes, so there might be a civilian totally in charge of that project.
Okay, now we're going into riffing here, Jim. Let's do this. Let's go here for a second.
I was going to suggest it
because you could create. Because I could see being given us orders from Starfleet for some fringe science that they have to push the limits, and maybe the value for that. Either the game has a trait or the character has a value that in order to find this science, they're going to have to push the limits. And then maybe the captain and some of the people on the crew have the preserve ship above all else value. And now all of a sudden you have these great two conflicting. I mean, that's a story right in itself.
But and going beyond.
Go ahead.
So going beyond the idea of just being a single episode or a handful of episodes, your motivations are completely different. When if you're a civilian character, your motivation is your field of study. Whereas if you're a Starfleet character, your motivation is likely more to be the betterment of the Federation or the Starfleet as a whole. You've got a much less focused and refined driving force. As a civilian character, yeah, you're doing this one project. That's a cool couple of episode arc, but it fails. That doesn't change your motivation. You still are pursuing that again and again and again. So not only do you push the limits of the value one time, it keeps going and going and going. And your focus is so much easier to define. I think your motivation would be a lot easier to handle. So for a newer player, I think it might actually be a good way to start out understanding how you do player motivations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think about like in the Shackleton book, we have Dr. Tolliver is a major NPC. I could imagine somebody taking her on as a main character and getting directly involved in the exploration of the Expanse, getting into the Telecall storyline, and just digging down into that, and being the civilian head of the scientist with a lot of political pull behind her, right? And I think this plays into the idea. And I think we talked about this a little bit with the captain and the first officer episodes, where we've been spending this whole episode talking about the science role, specifically, here's your job, here's what you do. We haven't even added on the layer yet of what your character is, right? Or who you are as a person, right? If you think about Spock and Dax and Data, like those are some of the big science officers we've seen on the shows. Of course, there's certainly been others, but like they had a lot of stuff going on in their characters that had necessarily nothing to do with being a scientist, right? Dax had the symbiote and the whole back history of the Klingons and all kinds of other stuff. Spock, of course, is Spock. Data's an android. Like there are so many other layers that you can start putting on top of this, in addition to just being the scientist, whether you're civilian or Starfleet. And I think that's one way to, if we're riffing, to make a civilian scientist work is not only are you a civilian scientist, but you could potentially have connections with other characters. You could have pull with the admiral, the local admiral. You could have pull with the Federation Science Council. There could be all kinds of stuff going on that can really give your game master some really interesting strings to start pulling on.
Rival scientists.
Our resident scientist, which is Aaron's character, our chief science officer, is big on writing white papers, essays, and dissertations, which have made them a guest lecturer at many a Federation function. So that makes it easy to, find off-ship adventures, or even, hey, what were you doing at that conference for the last 2 months? It creates a lot of fun stuff as they delve into their specialty in weird ways.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that too, Michael, because one of the things I was just thinking of is the talents that exist for the science division, I think are some of the most role playable talents in the game, and can really develop your character in fun ways when you are using them. I know Jim loves his baffling briefing talent, but like even just like, being font of knowledge or testing a theory, that type of stuff is all very much role played as your character. So when you are choosing those talents, try to think about how would your character go about doing that? What would they be saying? Because I think that they really give your character a chance to shine.
Studious.
Yep.
That's one I try to role play a lot. Just, hey, I'm going to go into whatever data I have and really pick it apart and try to figure it out. Yeah. How does my character do that? Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the talent, but there's one that allows you to basically get ranks in, or a focus in any specialization for a limited time. I like that.
Walking encyclopedia.
Walking encyclopedia, yeah.
He has that one too.
You know what? But to be fair, I've only ever used it one time,
which I don't understand.
It never came into play that game either.
I don't understand. I would use it every single episode. It's one of the most amazing focus.
My character is veteran, and this past game that we were just playing is the first time I used veteran. I don't like using talents unless I absolutely have to, because I'd rather just role play it.
That's weird, right? We may have. No, you're not weird. You're just playing the way you want to play. That's okay. I think we need to do a whole episode on the. I don't want to say pros and cons, because there are no pros and cons, but like the choice to have your talents inform your role playing versus not, choosing not to, right? And, each option is equally valid, right? But like me, I think if I were to, because you only get a handful of talents, right? You got to be really selective about what you pick, even though you can change them as you get milestones and stuff. But like if I'm going to go through the character creation process and be really intentional about picking 4 talents, I would want to maximize the use of those as much as possible. And I think that would inform how I'm role playing my character. Like if I'm cautious, or if I'm what's the one talent? Did the reading. Right?
Yes.
That's a talent, right? Did the reading. Yeah. I would find a way to fold that into every single scene I possibly could, just because that's such an essential part of my character, right? But I'd love to hear your perspectives, Aaron. I'd love to hear your perspectives sometime on why you choose not to use them, right? I think that's a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, to add on to that, I want to do a contrast. Suppose Aaron feels that way, then what I would suggest, which he has done also, is create talents that are so singular to their character that when they do get used, then they're potent. So he created one called Grand Theory of the Mole. It was this big area of space we were dealing with. And we're not dealing with the mole every episode, but when it comes up, he's the expert on it. So we may have to...
It gets rolled. Yeah, that's the episodes that it gets rolled, and suddenly momentum just, kind of blows up like popcorn. But yeah,
I think even without using them as a mechanical effect, the idea of having them help inform the way you're going to role play the character and how their position on the ship is built. Having a character who is a walking encyclopedia, even if you never use the talent, just spouting off random facts occasionally. Like I had a Vulcan who had that, and I would just correct everyone about everything because I could.
You're describing my character.
Yeah.
Okay. We're good. Before we digress too much, Jim, yes, we'll have an episode just about using talents to round out your character. I love this.
Yeah. It's funny. No, yeah, walking encyclopedia is great for a scientist, just because you are, especially if you're going to be a Starfleet scientist, you're going to have a very broad base of knowledge that you're going to start with. And then you're going to go through your Starfleet career, probably even before you begin play, and gain more knowledge from other little places. So even if you might not have the talent, it's a good idea to kind of say, hey, look, I might not have a focus of, let's say, high energy physics or quantum physics, but I know something about it. I can speak at length. I don't have the focus, but here you go.
Someone said something about this last week. I want to say it was you, Aaron. And let's go back to talking about designing your science officer for this game. And they said, suppose you have one main science, field of study, but what if all of your other focuses and talents are still derivative of that main study? So I forget who said it, but to me, I was like, whoa, that's so deep. So say, for instance, archaeology, but say you also happen to have exobiology. So maybe it's archaeology that pertains to development biologically. So creating connection between all that tissue. I don't think
that's wrong. No, I didn't say that, but I don't think that's a wrong approach at all, because everyone's going to have something that you're most passionate in life about. And especially if you're a scientist, you've gone to school for something. This is what drove you into your schooling. This is what drove you into your research. And as you kind of branch out, you're going to have those connections back to that core in some way, shape, or form. It's going to be a rare instance where you find something that's completely disconnected from what your original interest is. Not saying that it's impossible. It happens. I mean, I've fallen into interests as well that were outside of my initial, research drive. But yeah, having it branch out and going, okay, well, I like with my character as an example, again, you can say I started as my Tellarite as a psychiatrist, and then he branched out and into like diplomacy. So he approaches diplomacy with this idea towards understanding people's mindset and their drives, their inner needs and traumas as a society. So kind of approaching it in that direction. And then he has his other weird sciences that are on the side that seemingly are completely disconnected, but they aren't. And those are story points that should probably come out in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like looking at focuses and saying, let's do 3 or 4 that are kind of broad, and maybe 2 or 3 that are a lot more narrow, that may never pop up, but when they do pop up, it's an amazing story beat. And I know that Aaron and I in the past have also discussed, specialization in a focus, right? Because you could have, exobiology as your focus, or xenobiology as your focus, but then maybe exogenetics as your specialization, right? Yeah. And so that would be like a much more narrow focus, but way more interesting if it ever comes into play.
Yeah, and there's no rules for that in the book, really. I mean, I think I touch on something like that in the science division book as a possibility. Like, hey, you might have pathogens as a focus, but what kind of pathogens? Maybe you have a specialty in Vulcan pathogens. Well, talk to your game master about that. Maybe you can get a bonus of some sort or an immediate advantage when dealing with a pathogen that is specifically from Vulcan. And that would make sense. But otherwise, your pathogens as a broad focus, you still have the benefit of having a focus on it. It would just be something to work with your game master about. But it shows that kind of really broad net of science, that science can be both very broad and hyper-focused.
Well, I think also it's at the session 0 when your character is introduced. And again, this doesn't just go for science characters, but when the game master is looking at all the focuses and all the talents of everybody who's playing the game, is mapping out the episodes in the future based off of that as much as possible. And then, like, I just had a new player who, after playing one game and then picked up the operations book, said, you know what? I want to swap a lot of these because I didn't picture what this game was going to be like before. I have new ideas. I'm like, let's go for it. This is your story, man. You know, so again, there's no wasted talents and focuses as long as you hold them up in the face of your game master and say, hey, bring this story out about my character.
Yeah. No, that's great. And you know, just you saying that, Michael, makes me think like somehow we need to find a way to, I have no idea what product we would fit it into. I'd have to think about this, but like, wouldn't it be cool if we could figure out a way to tell game master, or not tell, but suggest to game masters, like, once you've got all your player characters, you know, create some sort of matrix of their focuses and their talents, and think about ways that you can mix and match and create story ideas, and like just to provide that kind of advice to them. And then connected to that is something I was just thinking about earlier too, just listening to you all riff, is you know, Al, I'm not going to say this was a missed opportunity because we didn't think of it, but wouldn't it be cool if we could somehow find a way to add a section to, you know, some future product that talks about each role and how that role can enable other roles to get involved in the game. Again, I'm channeling Sam from last week or the last couple episodes. Like, hey, you're the science officer. If you want to be a good involved player, you know, supporting your other players, here's how to get the con officer involved. Here's how to get ops involved. Here's how to get the doctor involved in ways that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of it before, right? And so it's not just it's not just you at the table. It's your entire group. Yeah. And gosh, wouldn't that be a neat conversation to have?
And now make sure to keep, as one, you know how we put little examples on everything. Yeah. Make sure to have where Spock calls McCoy in to arm the torpedo in Star Trek and Discover Country.
Yeah. There's tons of examples from canon that we can pull from.
Oh yeah.
So I want to take a pause here, and then I want to ask everybody a question, kind of like getting to one aspect of playing the game. And I want to, especially because science is such a big, gigantic thing, right? There's so much science. If you know, imagine, if you will, I know it might be hard for this group, but you know, you're all very imaginative, so I'm sure you'll manage. Imagine you are a new player coming into Star Trek Adventures. You don't know much about Star Trek. You don't know much about the game, but you know you're going to play the science officer, whether you've been voluntold that you're going to be the science officer, or you thought, oh, you know, Dax and Spock, and they're pretty cool, I want to be a science officer. You know, are you going to be lost and confused? Is there enough material in the books that can help you along? Like how can a new player, new to all of this, be successful as a science officer, given that they probably don't have a multiple year degree or multiple degrees, like a lot of the Star Trek characters probably have multiple degrees. So like, what can I do? Hey, I'm a brand new player to the game. I have no science background whatsoever, other than maybe what I got in public school or whatever. And I want to be the scientist. How can I be successful?
You're going to be successful because you want to be that character. Like, I would say, I mean, that's a simple answer, right? But if you want to be that character, don't sweat the fact that you don't have a degree. You're here to play a game. And if you're at the table with a whole bunch of people that also know that, hey, you're going to be trying your best, you might not know the difference between, you know, an M class star and a K class star, big deal. Work with your game master. The game master is going to be feeding you information as it is. That's great. And take your time. Don't feel intimidated. You're going to grow with your character in the role. You're going to learn little things and then start writing down your notes, writing down your character logs. So, hey, science officer's log. I just learned this, and this. I think this is a very cool idea to do research in the future. And then, hey, if it's a real thing from real science, don't feel like you need to, but if you look it up later on, maybe you'll find about 2 or 3 different ideas that you can bring to the table next time when something similar gets brought up.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that also falls on my shoulders as the game master, right? If we've had this conversation during a session 0 and you said, this sounds really interesting to me, I'm not much of a scientist, but I think this could be fun. Then on my end of things, I could be creating handouts like, what is a tachyon, right? Or, like if I know it's something that we're going to be encountering, print off the wiki and slide it across the table when you know what I mean? I think that, that will help them get the information that they need, and as they start collecting all that, oh, look, now you've got this scientific information. And if it ever pops up again, now I think, and I hate putting more work on the game master's shoulders, but if you're really trying to hook new players on a game, it's all about comfort, right? I'm a real big fan of preparing handouts and things like that for players, so that they can reference it, like they have something that they can go to and then come up with, a scientific explanation, so to speak.
Pictures, diagrams, and text. I mean, even in our game, there was a couple episodes where it was really early on. Maybe it was even before I actually started properly playing. Michael, you put together some sort of imagery that we actually pasted into the Discord that we use, and to show just kind of like what this was, what this would look like. And then here's like the actual diagram of that we found on Wiki of this is what space-time torque looks like. And this is how you can explain it. And you know what, if you make a mistake when you're the science officer and you're trying to explain something, big deal. They do it on the show too.
It depends to me.
No stress. No, yeah. I'm just saying, don't stress it. Just have fun with it.
To me, it depends on if you're playing a long-term campaign or if you're doing a one-shot. If I'm introducing new players to one-shot, it's all going to be about handouts and graphics and things like that they can use. If I'm a player or a game master for a long-term campaign, I still use some of those things, but I also, as a player, I put the onus on myself to be able to make the character more believable. So there's a ton of material in the books. The science book is amazing. There's also a website called Star Trek Minutia, which is I use for everything. There's a ton of stuff out there for like the Wikipedias and alpha canon, beta canon, all that stuff. And again, as Aaron said, you don't have to be a scientist. You just have to sound fakely believable. Like just make it up as you go. And as long as you can own the technobabble you're throwing at the game and your game master is okay with it and can run with it and can see it, it works. As a game master, I have a 118-page character show Bible for my game. And when we have science that does things, I take that science and I put it in the book. This is the science of Star Trek now. You can do these kinds of things again in the future. As for me, I like consistency in the way the science feels or the way the engineering feels. So that's something that I do. Again, that's an onus on me as a GM or as a player. And I wouldn't expect that or demand that from anybody who's just starting out, especially it's a one-shot. The more you play, though, the more I'm going to expect out of you as a player, and the more I would want people to expect out of me as a player and game master. So.
Yeah, Jeff, we keep a game glossary. So when we do use new terms or introduce a new science, we have a glossary so that later on when I reintroduce it, I say, oh, by the way, refer to the game glossary. And that refreshes everyone's mind. But to answer your question, Jim, from the player's point of view, the question as a science officer, and actually any officer, but science officer, especially because of the context of this conversation, that I would arm yourself with if you're a new science officer is, what does this look like in nature? Like, what is it similar to in nature? So that enables all of a sudden the game master, and, train your game master ahead of time. It's like, I want comparisons, because that's so Star Trek to do, where they make the science so accessible to everyone by creating comparisons like, oh, well, this is a subspace eddy or a subspace sandbar. Okay, so now I'm going to go use Wikipedia and Google, and I'm going to Google that, sandbars and how eddies move in the ocean. And I'm going to start coming up with my technobabble by putting tachyon or subspace or quantum in front of those words. And I'm going to say, oh, what we need is we need to create a quantum whirlpool, and then I'm going to build off of that first illustration that they give me. But my question is always going to be like, well, what is this like in nature that I've observed before? And then remember, game masters, your job is not to insist on what you thought was a good story. You're co-writing with your players. So as they come up with these ideas, roll with it, twist and turn. And if you want things to go a certain way, that's what Threaten is for. All right.
We just did that in a game recently too, where I was trying to describe, even with my character, like this really complex idea about using subspace to like anchor the ship. And then I was like, oh, anchor. Let's just call it a subspace anchor. Okay, that works, and sometimes it comes naturally like that, where you're just you might come from a technobabble direction and then just realize, oh, I can do it this way, and just explain it, and everyone gets it finally. All right.
And that's a good way as a character to be able to help drive everything for, like, Ricky, you can confound some GMs that way. I've had many players who were come up with ideas that I had never, like, I write a lot of stories that I don't write endings to. Like, I don't know how you're going to handle this. I put you in the hole. You guys get out of the hole. Exactly. And that's the kind of way they do it. Like, they use the terminology like that to just throw it at me. Like, yeah, that sounds plausible. All right, we'll do that. And as long as it makes a good story, whatever's the best for the narrative, that's what's going to work. And I think going into it with that mentality as a new player, I think that can really help you get comfortable with the position. Because role playing is really all about being comfortable with the people you're around and exposing yourself.
Well, I crack up too, because like once you get that under your belt of technobabble, like all of a sudden, Aaron, who plays our chief science officer, he'll say something like crazy that I'm like, oh my Lord, where's this guy coming from? But everybody in the room kind of turns to him and like, let's go with that, Yeah. and so the more proficient you become with the technobabble as a chief science officer, it's really fun to watch that evolve as a character.
Yeah, I mean, I love that as a game master. And Jeff, you hit it right on. Like when you get to a point in the game where your players are riffing off each other and coming up with these incredible possibilities that are way better than what I came up with. Like in my scribbled down notes, how I think it might turn out, maybe, I don't know. And then the players are going off on all these tangents. I'm like, oh, that sounds so great. Maybe I can just tweak it a little bit and give them a little nudge here and there. But like 99 times out of 100, it's like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's go with that. And then we get to the resolution. But I just love that. I mean, there were so many times during my sessions where like I could just put myself on mute and sit back for half an hour and just listen to the players playing their characters back and forth, coming up with all these incredible solutions. And I wasn't feeding them any information. They were just building the story together, each other, the true collaborative storytelling. And it's so powerful. It creates such a great energy.
It's one of the most fun things about being a game master.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, it's a dopamine high for me. So
yeah.
Anyway, so gosh, this has been such a great conversation. I think we should probably start getting to the wind up here. I guess let's go around the around the room, around the screen, whatever. Let's get some last thoughts on playing a science officer. What do you dig? What do you want? And let's start with Aaron.
I love being a science officer. I love playing a science officer because I love science, but I also like teaching other people science, even if it might be some of the Star Trek science that's fake. I can still link it into real life stuff. Mm-hmm. And Al's a teacher. I'm not a teacher. I'm a researcher, but I still love teaching. That's really important, and it's great to get passionate about something that you have found either in science. In your role as a science officer, like, hey, I'm passionate. I found this really cool idea in astronomy that I love, and you've gotten into it, and now you can share it with the rest of the people at your table. That's just me coming into it normally. Hey, I can talk about stars all day long and different kinds of planets all day long to everybody in our game. And it helps in the role, but you don't need that to start with. You might find that in this role.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it cool.
Nice. Awesome. Great. Jeff, what are your thoughts, closing thoughts on science?
My favorite part of playing a science character is the interpersonality, the interpersonal connections. As we said before, I think the science officer tends to be the character that is the most upfront and the one who can do the most, other than maybe the captain, to involve everyone else in the crew. And that's something that I really enjoy doing. It gives me a chance to role play more with everybody. And I think it gives me an opportunity to explore my character in a deeper sense because I get more screen time, essentially, which is greedy, but I like it. So,
nice. Al, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, this is your chance to have a lot of fun. It's your chance to kind of focus a little bit, a lot on the science, but also a little bit on the fiction as well, right? You can get as strange as you want with being a scientist, like your reason for being on a ship, whatever your experiments are, whatever your project. I remember when I first watched Discovery and I saw Paul Stamets with the fungus, and I was like, what is going on? I'm like, this is the strangest thing in the world. But it was weird and out there. And I think that's okay to embrace, create your own little bit of science and make it adjacent to what Trek science is, and have fun with it, because I think that you can get really, really creative with what you can do and what you can study as far as being a science officer.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, I'll offer a couple thoughts and I'll get it over to you for your thoughts, and then you can start off with the shout outs. I'll echo all this and say, science officer is really, really fun. Don't sweat the details, make it up as you go, make it, try to kind of make it sound plausible if you want to, but you know what? They've been faking it for 56 years on Star Trek. So don't feel bad if you don't get it right, because there is no right, you're just making it up. And I would also encourage players, think about some of the sciences that you don't normally see. Obviously astrophysics, chemistry, biochemistry, et cetera, are pretty popular, but anthropology, archaeology, sociology, these are all sciences.
The soft sciences.
The soft sciences. You can have a perfectly viable chief science officer who's focused on the soft sciences just as much as the hard sciences. So get creative, do something different, and see how your choices for your character might shape the whole campaign, right? Maybe it's a more of a soft science focused campaign that, talk to your game master, of course, and your other players, but just, play with the possibilities. Because if you were to Google science on Wikipedia or just in general, there's a lot of science out there. It's not just the traditional stuff that you see. So have fun with it and be bold and be creative. Michael, your last thoughts on science?
Yeah, it sums up basically everything everyone said. Again, when it comes to creating your science officer, find something you're actually passionate about in real life too. I actually invite anybody who creates a character to take one thing that they actually have in life and take it to the future. So for instance, I'm talking about Aaron here, he's into atmospheric sciences and he brings that into the game with his character. Al's into teaching and he has a daughter, which he taught, and so in the game. And so bring something you're doing. If you happen to like cooking, make botany your specialty and be the scientist that's always going on the away missions to discover new foods and replenish the ship. Or maybe you're really into pets. Okay, so let's go ahead and do animal handling or pet psychology and bring that into the game. And the game master, again, is going to expound on it when all of a sudden you confront a wild animal in a jungle. Can you use your animal handling sciences, veterinary skills in order to change the tone of the game? So my invitation to you, instead of being paranoid about, what focuses and talents I'm going to create for the character, you do something in your life that's STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics. You already are an expert in at least one thing. So bring that into the game to form your character. And that will open up a lot of the other focuses, talents, and character development. Way more fun too, when you can all of a sudden I'll spout out organizational psychology with my characters, just or data analytics, which are what I do in real life, so.
Michael, you said biology and then animal handling, and I go, man, a Klingon science officer that's a targ trainer.
Oh, targ train! Oh, how wonderful would that be? I would love it. Cool. So
wow, that would be fun.
All right. So man, we're gonna have to do every episode we create like 2 more things to talk about. So I think we're going to all have to like have a create your favorite science officer episode, and then we're gonna have how to use your create super great focused talents episode too. All right. So of course I like doing gratitude. As usual, I didn't do gratitude for 2022, and normally I do brick and mortar. I know that, but I actually wanted to do a 2022 gratitude, and it was based off things that I had heard from people and fans of the game on social media. And so my gratitude actually goes to you today, Jim, because people were commenting today about the different writers you have from different backgrounds. And as they watch our show, we're going to see a lot more of it this year, the variety of people and backgrounds and educations and lifestyles that are coming on the show and playing the game. And honestly, for me, where, and probably Alan and Aaron is the same thing. Or others you've invited into the game is you don't just wait for people to go to you. You actually reach out to them. And so I know I'm busy trying to pay it forward. I know everybody here does the same thing. So I'm going to thank you for that, Jim, because 2022 was an amazing year for Star Trek Adventures. And I have a feeling that 2023 is going to be even a bigger year. And so I commit to paying it forward in reflection of you.
Well, humbly, thank you very much.
All right, let's pass it over to Aaron. Gratitude. And then you pass the baton.
God, I'm grateful to have the people that are here in the community, you guys at the game, everybody, in our game, and the other writers, because how often do you find a group of people that you can just truly like pour your energy and passion out and not really just get it tossed to the side or ignored? Like everybody here in the game, the writers, the fan base, they'll just take that energy, grab it, and go, yes, let's amplify it and keep going and throw out more energy out into the ether. I'm so grateful to have that. And thank you.
Jeff?
It's unredundant, but I think I spend a lot of time seeing what the fans talk about. I go to a lot of the Facebook pages and Discord servers and like that. And I think if I have gratitude for anything really, and it comes to this game, it is definitely that. The fans make it fun to do this stuff. I'm not on camera often, but I enjoy doing these edits and stuff and getting these things out because I like to see the reaction these fans have, and the growing community is very dear to me. And I have a lot of gratitude for all of the people who put forward the effort to make comments and to share the videos and that kind of thing, spread the idea of the hobby around, and just make the time not feel like I'm wasting my time.
Good thoughts. Thank you. Al, how do you want to bring it out for your gratitude?
I just want to thank all the game masters out there that are introducing new people to the game. We grow the game slowly and steadily, and it's as big now as it's ever been. And it's, we have you to thank for that. If you can expose one new table of players to the game and 2 of them get hooked, I mean, that's how the game keeps going. So I appreciate all of you that are taking time out of your schedule to plan and run sessions for new players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one fan at a time. That's how you do it, right? Star Trek's been doing that for 56 years. Other game companies have been doing that for 40 odd years or whatever, right? It doesn't happen overnight. You gotta put the grind in. You gotta put the work in, right? So, I got 2 thank yous. First thank you is to all of the science advisors for all of the Star Trek shows over the years who helped the writers, who helped the actors make it sound believable. And so that they put it on the screen, you didn't think about it too often. Like sometimes there'd be like a little bit of like, what are they doing? Okay. But like Star Trek has inspired so many people to get into sciences and into the space program and so much else, and has just inspired the lay people, like me, who like, here's the science. It's like, hey, that sounds good enough. Or maybe I'll go do some research, and that's the job, right? That's the win, is like you're getting people to go be curious and go learn something new. And even if you heard something on Star Trek that didn't quite sound right, then you can go research it and like, oh, I would have done it this way, or I would have done it that way, or whatever. So thank you to all the people involved in the shows, scientists who helped the writers, and then the writers who wrote the dialogue, and then of course the actors who had to actually put those words into their mouths and make it sound believable. I hats off to them day in and day out. You know, I mean, you mentioned Samus, you know, Jordy, Data, everybody. I mean, all of them, Spock, etc. So much technobabble. Like, how do you make it? But they made it work because that's their job. They're professionals. And then the other thank you, I'll echo literally everybody on this call is like, thank you to the fans. I cannot thank you enough. We've been doing this for 60 odd episodes now, and I will continue to thank you every single episode, because without the fans, we wouldn't have a game. We wouldn't be going into year 7 on this game without a strong, healthy fan base backing us up, supporting each other, you know, loving the game. I'm not on every channel. I'm sure there's conversations about the game that I haven't seen yet, although I don't know where they would be. But like, there's so much positive support from the fans to other fans, like, got nothing to do with me or any of you guys as writers. I know you're all very supportive on all the different channels, but to see the fans taking it upon themselves to help other fans and to answer the questions is just so valuable. So thank you for all your support as always and ever. So thank you.
All right. So with that, we continue the conversation. Thank you everyone for joining us. Aaron, Al, Jeff, and always Jim. IC.
Be safe, be well, live long and prosper. Thank you, Michael. Thank you all. We'll talk to you next time.